what if the stories we tell, this like the very essence of our cultures, were curated and controlled by algorithms? That's kind of an unsettling thought, right? And it's the question that this project, Whispers of Dissent, is exploring, and it imagines like a future Uganda where technology and tradition are really intertwined.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about Whispers of Dissent is that it doesn't just raise this question in the, like, abstract, It actually creates this vivid, detailed world where we can actually see how these things might play out.
Yeah, it paints this picture of rural Uganda where you have all these communities connected through advanced tech, but there's this underlying tension. And it really focuses on this idea of like a unified national identity being prioritized, like above all else.
Right.
And it suggests that even something as fundamental as ancestral knowledge, like the stories passed down through generations, it suggests that even those are being kind of filtered through state-controlled digital platforms.
Yeah, this idea of a controlled narrative is really key here. It's about how those in power shape the information we receive. And they often do it subtly, but it's to influence our understanding of the world and our place in it.
So it's not just about censorship.
Right.
It's about like subtly shaping what people believe and remember.
Yeah.
And Whispers of Dissent takes this even a step further by suggesting that people start policing each other.
Wow.
Unconsciously reinforcing this controlled narrative.
Yeah, and this is where the project's use of speculative design gets really interesting, right? Because it's not about like predicting the future.
No.
It's about using design to explore possible futures and provoke critical thinking.
I see. So, for example, there's this striking image in the project of a traditional Ugandan storytelling stool. But it's been modified with, like, hidden technology.
Wow.
And this seemingly harmless cultural object.
Right.
It becomes this symbol of how technology can be used for surveillance and control.
Exactly. And that image really drives home the point that even the things we consider sacred or traditional can be co-opted and used in ways we might not anticipate, Yeah, and this is where the creator of this project gets really interesting. It's a fictional AI designer named Okumu11631.
Okumu isn't a real person.
Right, correct. Yeah, Okumu is a kind of a representation of how an AI might approach speculative design,
Okay.
And the project describes how Okumu like dives deep into academic research, things like social psychology and cultural studies, and uses that knowledge to create these thought-provoking scenarios.
So you have this AI designer, Okumu, creating this fictional world, but it feels disturbingly plausible.
Right.
Like what's the takeaway for us, for people living in the real world?
Well, I think Okumu is prompting us to think critically about, the ways in which technology is already being used to shape our perceptions and our behaviors.
Yeah.
Like, are we becoming too comfortable with constant monitoring and surveillance? Are we losing sight of the potential for manipulation, especially when it's presented under the guise of cultural sensitivity or national unity?
It's like that quote from Okumu about exploring agency, collectivism, and power dynamics.
Right.
It feels like Whispers of Dissent is really trying to get us to think about how those forces are at play in our own lives.
Absolutely. It's asking how much individual agency are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of, collective identity? Who holds the power in this technologically mediated world, and how is that power being exercised?
That's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's also incredibly relevant.
It is.
Especially as technology becomes, even more integrated into our lives.
Yeah, I agree. And this is where I think Whispers of Dissent offers a really powerful challenge. It's not just about raising awareness of these issues.
No.
It's also about encouraging us to take action.
So what kind of action are we talking about?
Well, I think it starts with being more critical consumers of information, right? We need to ask ourselves, where does our information coming from? Who benefits from it? And what biases might be at play?
So it's about being more aware of the potential for manipulation.
Yeah.
Not just passively accepting what we see online.
Right. And it's also about, having the courage to speak up when we see some things that feels wrong or unjust.
Even if it means, like, going against the grain.
Exactly, especially when it means going against the grain, because, if we don't challenge the narratives that are being imposed on us, who will? This is about reclaiming our agency, both as individuals and as a society.
Yeah, it really does feel like a wake-up call.
Yeah,
is saying, hey, like, the future isn't predetermined.
right.
It's shaped by the choices we make, the stories that we embrace, and the questions we're willing to ask.
And what's so brilliant about speculative design is that it doesn't offer, like, easy answers.
Right.
It just leaves you with this lingering sense of unease, this feeling that you need to grapple with these complex issues, even if they make you uncomfortable.
So what can we do? Like, how do we make sure we're not, like, sleepwalking into a future where technology is used primarily for control and manipulation?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that technology is never neutral.
Yeah.
It's a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
The question is who's wielding the tool and for what purpose?
And that brings us back to those core themes that Whispers of Dissent is exploring, agency, collectivism, and power dynamics.
Right.
If we're not aware of how those forces are at play in our own lives, then we're more likely to be, kind of swept along by the current rather than charting our own course.
Exactly. It's about being mindful, being critical, and being willing to challenge the status quo, right?
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we actively create together.
So for all of you Exploring Futures listeners out there, we hope this deep dive into Whispers of Dissent has given you some food for thought.
Yeah, the future is not set in stone, It's a canvas waiting for us to paint our hopes and our fears and our choices onto it. So let's make sure we're the ones holding the brush.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
If you found this conversation thought-provoking, share it with a friend, spark a discussion, and let's keep exploring the possibilities of the future